Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and we're going to compare the 2018 iPad with the Surface Go. Both of these devices are really good in their own way, and let's first talk about the price. Now, the iPad comes in at $329 and goes up to $559. It has an LTE option as well, and it offers either 32 gigabytes of storage or 128 gigabytes of storage. On the Surface Go, we've got $399 to $549. There is no LTE option just yet, and these come in at 64 gigabytes or 128 gigabytes of storage. The 128 gigabytes of storage also has an SSD-based storage, so it's much faster. It's about 3 to 4 times faster. The higher end version of the Surface Go also has 8 gigabytes of memory or RAM as opposed to 4 gigabytes on the lower end, where the iPad comes in with 2 gigabytes of RAM and also has the A10 Fusion processor. In here we have a Pentium Gold 4415Y with an Intel HD 615 graphics chip. So they're fairly evenly matched as far as the processing power, although the iPad is more optimized for graphics, so it's a little bit faster with certain things. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. Now, if we take a look at the design of them, you can see the iPad is very familiar at this point. We do have a camera on the back. It's an 8 megapixel camera that can record in 1080p, and the design is very simple and straightforward. You've got your volume buttons here on the one side. On the bottom, you've got 2 speakers, you've got your lightning connector, and then on the other side, there's nothing. And then on the top, depending if you have the LTE version or not, this will have a black plastic piece. This is not the LTE version. We've got a headphone jack, microphone, and power sleep wake button. Now on this device, on the Surface Go, we also have a 1080p 8 megapixel camera. This is where the antennas are, and the iPad's made out of aluminum. This is made out of magnesium. So this feels a little bit more sturdy. They're very similar as far as weight. The iPad is 1.03 pounds, where the Surface Go is 1.15 pounds. This is without any accessories. Now, the Surface has a built-in kickstand here, which goes all the way back and is very durable and flexible. You won't break it. You also have expandable storage on the Surface Go, up to a terabyte of micro SD storage. And then we have some different options on here. So on this side is our connectivity. We have our headphone jack, our USB Type-C connector. You can use external storage, as well as you can charge through this port. You also have your Surface connector that allows you to use the Surface dock and an external monitor. Now on the top, you've got your power sleep wake button, your volume button. On this side, nothing at all. And then on the bottom, you have your connector for your Surface keyboard or your type cover. And this is proprietary to this device. The other Surface device keyboards will not work on this device's keyboard base connector. It's a little bit different. Now let's talk about the display on the front. You can see I've got some fingerprints on this. I just wiped this off, and it does seem to have a little bit more fingerprint left on the Surface Go as opposed to the iPad. So they both have 10-inch displays. On the Surface Go, we have a little bit lower resolution of 1800 by 1200 with 217 pixels per inch. It is noticeable that it's not as high resolution as the iPad itself, but they're both very good. They seem to have about the same amount of fingerprints, but I do find that the Surface tends to be a little bit more reflective, or at least it appears to. There's a different coating on the iPad. You can see the camera there. It just seems to be a little bit more reflective, in my opinion, when you're using the Surface. Also, you have much thicker bezels, but the Surface does feel much more sturdy to me than the iPad does. You could actually flex the iPad slightly if you wanted to. If you really want to twist, you can flex it. Now, as far as the iPad, you do have a higher resolution, like I said, of 2048 by 1536 with 256 pixels per inch. And then both of them have forward-facing cameras. It's a little bit better on the Surface with a 5 megapixel camera, and then on the iPad it's only 1.2 megapixels, basically used for FaceTime or photo booth to make goofy faces, things like that. On the iPad you have Touch ID, and then you have Windows Hello on the Surface Go, which is really nice for logging in. It's very similar to Face ID, but it's a little bit different technology. While both devices can be used in either portrait or landscape, these are their natural states. The Surface is more more apt to be used in a landscape mode. You do have forward-facing stereo speakers on the Surface Go, where on the iPad they're only down firing, so you don't get the stereo sound. Now let's turn these on and take a look at the OS and talk about that a little bit. Now both of these devices have very different operating systems. The iPad has iOS, which is very efficient for mobile and designed from the ground up for that purpose. The Surface Go comes with Windows in S mode or Windows S and can be bumped up to Windows Home for free, which is what I have running now on this because you can do a little bit more with it. But you have Windows S, and then you can go to Windows Home for free or Windows Pro for $99. Now, to use both of these as a tablet is very different. This one is basically Windows and a full OS. You can use it with a keyboard and mouse, and obviously we have the Windows Pen or Microsoft Pen and the Apple Pencil. Both of these are $100. You can charge the Apple Pencil via the Lightning port, and you can charge the pen, change the battery in the pen when you need to about once a year. It's a quadruple A battery, and it works really well. Both of them work really well. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Now, using the iPad is a little bit different than Windows, like I mentioned before, but maybe you want to open Word. We'll open an Excel document, and maybe we want to have them side by side to look at them. We can do that on iOS, but it's a very different experience. So maybe we open Word here. We'll bring in Excel on the side, and then we pull down, and then we can split or have split view, and we can view both of them at once. And you can use this with the pencil. You can use it with an external keyboard as well, Bluetooth keyboard, but there are no ports for it on this version of the iPad. Both of these seem to work well and have a good amount of function, but we have the full version of Windows on Windows S or Windows Home, so depending on what you're using. Now, some people have been asking me what it's like to use this as a tablet, and you can just open this like a document like we have here, but this is the full version running Office 365. You have to have an account, and it comes with a 30-day trial built in. While Office does fall under what Microsoft considers to be the threshold for free versions of Office 365 on mobile devices, it's not offered free on the Surface Go as far as I've seen. Now, you do have the full version of Word. You can use it in landscape or portrait mode here. You can use it either way. It closed here by accident. Let me open it. We're back in a document, and you would use this like you would traditionally with your Windows computer hooked up to another monitor, or here. You can also use it with a Surface mouse. So if you want to use your mouse here and minimize at the same time, you can do that. You have all of those options you're very familiar with. Maybe you want to go to a web page, browse the web page, and then go here. It's the same experience you expect on Windows 10. It works really well. It's very fast and fluid, and I haven't had any issues as far as that goes. Now, using it as a tablet, let's switch it to tablet mode because we do have a dual mode on this as opposed to the iPad. So now we're in tablet mode. I've switched, and this reminds me of Windows 8. It's very similar to that, and the only difference is instead of having your start button here for your apps, it's just one giant start button. So if I want to open Word, we'll open Word back up, and now it's full screen. It's just optimized as a tablet the same way. So if I want to open Chrome here, we can still bring the window out and split it on the screen like that, and then open Word in the other window, and now we've got the same sort of split view mode and similar sort of layout that we had before. Now, one thing I will say between the two OSs is the keyboard on the Surface is not as fluid as far as the software keyboard goes compared to that on the iPad. So if I type something, say like, "Hi, how are you today?" It seems to work fine right now, but I do find there's a delay when I open it many times. So we'll close it, see if we can get it to delay. It's working okay now, but I do find from time to time it delays itself when opening and closing. Now on the iPad, when you're using similar apps, there's a good experience here on both of these devices, but you've got a real computer as far as a full-blown computer on the Surface Go. But on the iPad, I would argue this is a real computer as well, even though it doesn't have expandable storage and a mouse input. Because it was designed for touch, it's very simple and responsive to touch. Web pages are fast, so if I go into Safari, go to Zollotech here, we'll open that back up on Chrome. And some people were saying Chrome was slow for them on the Surface Go. I have no issues with it, but you'll see it's nice and fast and fluid. If I want to pinch to zoom, it works fine. Might be a little bit less fluid though, and that's what I find. The touch responsiveness on both is very good, but I find that it's just a little bit more fluid here, and we can check that out in Edge as well. So if I go to my website in Edge, now it's a little more fluid, and pinch to zoom is much faster. So depending on what browser you're using is going to make a difference. You've got the option to use multiple browsers on the iPad as well. So those things work really well on both devices. But when it comes to things like games, that's where the Surface is a little bit ahead. Now, there are accessories such as the Surface keyboard, which is really, really good. It's backlit. It's pretty phenomenal. It's got a great throw to it, but it is $130 or $99 depending on which way you want to use this. But if I go into something, just to give you an example, this is where it's a full computer, but not incredible at games that are modern. But one of the things it is good at is you can run full Portal. So if you go into Portal, for example, we'll let it run here, and you'll see it actually works. It loads pretty fast, and while this is an older game, I did have someone ask me if Half-Life would work on it, and it seems to run Portal in full settings, no problem. So we'll wait for it to load here, and I'll show you what I mean. And then I'll show you an example of the mobile apps on the iPad versus this. So if I go into a new game here, we'll just start, well, I guess we'll just start a new game. You'll see it loads nice and fast, and we're in. We'll wait for it to load here. There we go. And it's pretty fast. I wouldn't expect amazing performance, but you'll see using the keyboard, if you have the keyboard accessory or an external Bluetooth keyboard, no issues here whatsoever. The frame rate's pretty good. There is a little bit of tearing here and there, but considering this is a fairly low power mobile tablet, it's quite good. Now we can go out of this, go to quit. And if you want to play your old Steam games on here, I don't see why that would be a problem at all as long as you're on Windows Home. Now, I did find I had issues with Adobe Photoshop. Photoshop was super choppy for me, but if you're using things like AutoCAD Mobile, you're not going to have an issue. AutoCAD runs, but you can only read from it. Now, one of the things this has that both of these have, let me detach this here. We'll switch it back to tablet mode, and I've put Minecraft on both of them. And I don't think I have anything running here. Let me close everything over here. I've got everything closed there, and I believe everything, well, I've got Word open. Let me close Word. And let's run Minecraft on both. So we'll see how they load. And of course, you can record your game here. You can do screen recording over here. And we'll hit play. We'll create a new one. Create new. Just to see how they compete. And if you're going to play games while Minecraft is not incredibly taxing, this gives you an idea of what it's like. So we're loaded on the iPad already. The iPad has the advantage when it comes to the actual graphics processing. And you'll see it works okay. We can use the mouse here, of course, which is a nice advantage if you want to use a mouse to game instead of just the touchpad. So we do have those options, and I think that part's great. Now, both of these have stylus options for input devices. We have a little bit different pencil here. They're both tilt and pressure sensitive, but they have different tips on them, and I would say the resistance on the Microsoft Pen is really good. The Surface Pen feels good on the glass. This is a little slippery for me, but some people love it. It's not bad on either one. Both have great input, but where the Surface Go really shines, or Windows in general, is Windows Ink. It's completely built into the OS. Click the button here, and you've got your little sticky notes. Bring those sticky notes up. You do have palm rejection, and you can just write hi. You don't need a separate app. You can move this around, do whatever you want with it. Close it off the screen, click this again, and go into different apps. Go into Screenshot, Sketchpad if you want to sketch something, and you'll see you can just draw immediately. The touch responsiveness is good. I've not really seen any lag whatsoever in any of the apps designed for this. Now, that said, with this you do get the extra button. You can erase with this. which makes it a little bit better than the pencil. But the pencil, a lot of artists have said, is better for things like drawing. Now, when you've got something like Word, for example, let me open Word. Within Word, on here, Windows Ink is built in so well that you can just draw here as well. Although occasionally the palm rejection is a little weird for me. So let's erase that. Get rid of the keyboard. Right high, you'll see it works very well here. But if you want to do that in Word here, wait for it to load. Drop the keyboard, and you can write here, but there was a little bit of lag at first. Now it's very responsive, and they're equal in that sense. But you do have a more plasticky feel with the pencil versus the pen that has a little bit of a rubberized tip feeling to it. Now, it depends on which one you like more. You don't get the eraser feature on the Apple Pencil. You don't get the extra button. So if those things are important, you may like that. I think the eraser feature is great. I wish they'd add that to the Apple Pencil. But both feel great, both work well, and I think you'd be happy with either or. Although there is no holder built in for the Apple Pencil like you have on the iPad, or you have on the Surface Go rather. The Surface Go is magnetic. It holds on. It's really tight. It's not going to shake off. And I think for most people that's a great solution. Although if it's in a bag, you may lose it in the bag and just have to remember to grab it. When it comes to the camera on both of these, the iPad's camera is okay, and it does the job that you want, maybe for video recording, but it doesn't really compare to that of the Surface Pro. So if we go into the camera here, we'll wait for it to load, and it's just a much nicer looking camera. Even though there's similar resolutions on the back, it's just the quality on the Surface is a little bit better. But when it comes to the front-facing camera, it's not even close. The Surface blows it away. You've got a 5 megapixel forward-facing camera here and a 1.2 megapixel camera here. It's really pretty poor as far as the front-facing camera goes. So if we go here, we'll go to camera. The cameras are flipped around, and the quality is tremendously different on the Surface. It's just way, way better. But that's because the resolution's over 4 times higher. So it's much better, and as far as that part goes, it's no contest. Both of these tablets are great. You do have a bunch of different options for the Surface Go as far as the Surface Dial and the Surface keyboards and the pen and the dock. But when it comes to the battery, that's where the iPad is a little bit better. The iPad generally gets me about 10 hours of use, 8 to 10 hours. The Surface Go only will get about 8 hours of use when you're playing video, so you might get 8, but in general usage, I found I get 4 to 5 on here. I regularly get about 8 hours on the iPad, so there's a big difference as far as that goes, and that may be because this is doing background tasks and things, but that's the downfall of the Surface Go. In my opinion, is not just the battery, but it's a whole operating system that you have to manage if you want it to just be a tablet. One of the things you might like is simplicity, or maybe you want a million different options. You've got that with the Surface Go as long as you're running Windows Home. So they're both great in different ways, and I think depending on your use case, if you really want the keyboard and you want the attachable keyboard on the Go that's also a cover that clicks in place, throw your pen on here, you're good to go. If you're more of an artist, you just want to draw and have simplicity, and then have all the apps you're familiar with on your iPhone and a lot of the different iOS games, you've got this one. You also have a much more robust app store on the iPad as opposed to the Surface if you're just going to use it in Windows S mode. If you're going to use it in home, you've got millions of apps. So it just depends on how you're going to use them and what you like. Now, with this whole package, the iPad is actually much cheaper. This is $329. This is actually the $329 version with the $100 pencil, so $429. This package right here is $550 plus the pen plus the keyboard. So you're about $700 or a little bit more after tax, depending where you live. Let me know what you think about both of these in the comments below. They're both really geared for the education market, and depending where you live, you may have iPads in your school, like I do and around schools near me, or you may be using Microsoft computers or maybe Chromebooks, and I think that's what Apple and Microsoft have gone after, that whole market with both of these devices. Let me know which one you would choose and why. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe and like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.